And I'm going to go live then, okay?
And then
going out live to YouTube.
Yep. Okay. And who's going to break in first?
Hold on.
Oh, well.
Give me about 10 seconds here while the live stream starts up so that we have the recording.
Yeah, but it's actually live before you know
it.
We know it's live before you know it's live.
Yeah, someone might be.
Okay, we are live.
Yeah. Go ahead, Curtis.
Okay, let's start then officially. As I see people coming in. Aloha, everyone from Hawaii. My name is Curtis Wu from the University of Hawaii. I'm facilitating this session. I think it's going to be a wild ride that we have, quite different from many of the other events that you've attended at TCC. This is a special session because it's part of our 24-hour Round the World series, celebrating our 25th anniversary of TCC. And actually, this is our 11th hour of continuous presentations. Alan has done one earlier in the day, so I'm sure he has recharged and is ready to go for this one. So I'd like to introduce you to our two of the several people who will be talking today, and they'll explain the rest of the agenda and presenters. Alan Levine, who is well known to TCC and in the tech world, has been around for a long time and is probably most famous for his CogDog blog and has written in many different venues. And you've probably, if you Google his name, you'll see it come up many times. So he will be sharing his time with Maha Bali, who's with American University in Cairo, out in Egypt, and they will be coordinating this really special event for us today. So I'm really excited about being able to see what you have in store. You folks are pretty much familiar with Zoom. You can feel free to chat in this area. This is being live streamed to Zoom, to Google, YouTube, and recorded. And so the recording will be accessible after the conference is over. So take care, everyone. Glad to see you are with us and have a wild ride for the next hour. Over to Alan.
Oh, well, thank you. And you should know that Maha's actually quite more famous than me. It's true, but we won't get into that. Thank you for joining a very unusual, there is no presentation here. This is a conversation. And so it's going to be better to let Maha explain sort of like what virtual connecting is, but it adds a separate like layer to it because it's typically meant for face-to-face conferences, which people don't do anymore, but we will do again. And so we wanted to try to give people here a little bit of example of what happens in one of these sessions. So technically, while we're live, we're acting as if this is the part where people who have agreed to be part of the presentation, some of them virtual, some of them at a conference, have gotten together and we're getting ready to go live. So we're like chit-chatty and talking about our cats and dogs and things like that. And although this one's quite unusual because we have so many people here. But Ma, where did this thing come from?
Right. So hi, everybody. So I'm the co-founder and the co-director of Virtually Connecting. And the idea of Virtually Connecting came about because I'm someone who, I live all the way in Egypt. I have a young child, and it was very difficult for me to go to conferences face-to-face. And I wasn't so much missing out on doing the presentations. You could really easily record or just join in and do the presentation. But I was missing out on those hallway conversations you have with people. You bump into someone and you get to talk to them, and just the social aspect of a conference. And so my friend Rebecca Hogue, who co-founded Virtually Connecting with me, was going to this one conference that I was really upset that I couldn't go to. And she said, I'll be your buddy there. I can use my phone and connect you with people. And what happened is, because I was on the organizing committee of that conference, I'm like, yeah, I'd like that, but I'll also let other people come in and join. So I was connecting with the keynote speakers and with other folks at the conference just to chat in between sessions. And we live streamed it to YouTube, and we asked people to join in, and people actually liked it. And they were like, hey, can we do that again? And so we kept doing it with more conferences, and it kept growing. So the point is, there are particular people, either who live in the global south, or women, or single parents with children, or people who are adjuncts or early career or graduate students, for whom funding to go to conferences is difficult. And we never hear their voices in conferences, but with Virtually Connecting, they get to connect with folks, and they're not just listening to the broadcast of a conference presentation, they're being part of the conversation there and then influencing the conference back. And we do it to so many educational technology conferences that it's almost like a part of conferences right now. So there's a lot of people here who are part of Virtually Connecting. Autumn and Christian are co-directors, other folks who are very active there and who are regional buddies. And the format of this session is what we call fishbowl, which I think Autumn invented to use with Virtually Connecting, which is pretend that you're watching a Virtually Connecting. And then everyone who's not part of Virtually Connecting can jump in as a participant. So what would normally be the case is that, for example, Alan would be at TCC in a face-to-face conference, and he would have, like, I don't know, Curtis and Terry and Jinli as on-site guests who are there at the conference. But since that's not the case right now, we're gonna pretend that this is a conference, and Mia and George are our on-site guests, and Ken is our virtual buddy. What he does is he would come in early, and people who are coming in, he would welcome them, help troubleshoot, make sure everybody's comfortable, which he's been doing kind of as people have been coming in. And then when everybody's here, we say we're gonna go live, and then we start the conversation, and that part is recorded. But we started recording earlier today. And what we're gonna be talking about today is slightly more focused. Like usually we don't have an agenda for Virtually Connecting. You just come in and, hey, how's the conference going? But today, the topic of the conversation that Alan and I decided to focus on is how can you apply the general idea of Virtually Connecting to a course, what you're teaching. So not conferences with academics and teachers, but actual undergraduate students or graduate students. And so I'm gonna let Alan take over from here, and then Mia can talk about how that, and George, how he's benefited, and then we'll open up the floor for everyone.
Okay. So, but first, like Ken is the virtual buddy. He'll say, "Are we ready to go live, Ken?" I think everybody's here.
Oh, do I have to remove my virtual background and pretending I'm here? Okay.
No.
So yes, I'm the virtual buddy. My job is usually to do the offsite setup, set up the feed, make sure people are here, and then let people know we're going to be going live to YouTube. This will be recorded. So if you want to turn off your camera or you want to leave or whatever, this is going to be recorded. And I'll try to facilitate and make sure that people are being included in the conversation as much as possible. Often when it's a big group, I'll have someone like Joe Murphy, who's up beside me in my view, is my co-buddy. So if something happens and I can't coordinate, or if my internet drops, he's here to help us out and coordinate the session and just facilitate the conversation. So I'll mute myself now.
And I think we're live. I can see an indication that we're live. Welcome. We're at the TCC conference, and brought a couple people along, and it's great to see so many people from out there. I'm Alan Levine, and I get a chance to be your on-site buddy. Typically, as an on-site buddy, I would actually not spend much time in front of the camera. I just try to find the space for it, and then I get out of the way, usually take pictures and send tweets, because really it's the people who are present, which we sort of decided that Mia and George would be what we consider our guests, because they're sort of doing this idea that we put in our proposal. I have worked with Mia, and I'll let her explain more about our network narratives class, but we were definitely inspired by my experience with Virtually Connecting, and I think I was at that first one that Rebecca did, and it was a real exciting experience. And we felt for this class that instead of like bringing in a guest to do a presentation and talk to our students, we wanted to have this conversational aspect of being able to bring people into our class and have a conversation with our students. And it was exciting. It meant less for them to plan, and it was like a more kind of a more human way for people to interact with an expert. So yeah, you want to talk a little bit, Mia, about what we did in NetNAR those first couple of years?
Sure. So I've had the great pleasure and honor of being a partner of Alan's in a special course that we've called Network Narratives. And we have a hashtag for it, NetNar, which is a shortened version of Network Narratives. But the course originally was inspired by an interest in electronic literature and storytelling on the open web. And so we were inspired by Alan's previous work with DS106, which is a very well-known digital storytelling class that's networked and open. And then my research and interest in electronic literature, which is literature born in a computational environment. At any rate, we had this course, and it's grounded in an institution, which is where I'm teaching, called Kane University in New Jersey. But we also wanted to sort of break down the four walls, so to speak, and make it a networked experience as well. And so we pursued doing that by sort of leaning into our professional learning network and inviting people from the outside to participate in a lot of the activities that we had. And we made a lot of things. That was one of the sort of sensibilities of the course. We consider ourselves digital alchemists playing with alchemy in a digital environment to tell stories and transform the way we perceive things. So at any rate, that's a thematic, but what Alan was talking about was our special tradition coined from the first iteration, which was some 4 years ago, of what we call studio visits. And it's just like what Alan said, is that we would invite artists, scholars, thinking partners to speak to us just in the kind of context we're chatting now. But what was, I think, the most simple and yet the most radical aspect of this model was that there wasn't any script and there wasn't a kind of formality and hierarchy that was assumed. It was meant to be an open conversation. There was no sense of like, we're interviewing this important person. And yet our students have been over time, have been able to speak to really, profound thinkers in a variety of fields. So as an example, we've had many folks within this hangout coming into our classrooms. We've crossed the seas to work with some of Maha's students and her and she herself. Just last week, we spoke to Sava Sahili Singh and Chris Gilliard about data surveillance in the course. So we have these chats, and the students really feel like thinking partners with the people we invite. In the past, Alan, we were recording some of this stuff, and we shared some of that material beyond. But lately, we have actually stopped the recording tradition and just sort of gone with the conversation. Yeah, so that's just a little introduction. I hope that helped clarify a bit of what we've done. And
I'm going to pause for a second and answer Curtis's question. So when we first started virtually connecting, we were using Google Hangouts on Air that gave us a limit of 10 people in a session. So there would be one session that was the on-site folks, which could have a lot of people in the same room together, and then 9 other people. And we liked that number. Autumn Keynes called it IMB. Something about, I keep forgetting what it stands for, multitudes barrier? Something like, when you have too many people, you can't have a good conversation, basically. But
the
now
interpersonal multitudes barrier.
Interpersonal multitudes barrier, thank you. And we had really good conversations with that. When you have a lot more than, I think, 12, 15 people, it gets really difficult for everyone to contribute, I think. But now we have Zoom because Hangouts on Air stopped working the way it used to work. So we do end up having more than that number. So going back to what Mia said, so other than NetNar, which at a time they connected to my course in Cairo, Mia Zamora and I worked with Catherine Cronin in Ireland to develop another course called Equity Unbound, where we intentionally created these conversations so that students from around the world could also have these open conversations with folks. And again, we used to record all of them, but last semester we had, again, Sava Sahili Singh talking about surveillance. And we had her for 2 different sessions. And we didn't record those because students could talk more comfortably about certain things if they weren't being recorded. They could talk about surveillance in higher education in general and comfortably, right? And George Station last semester joined one of these sessions with his entire class. Like, he was on his computer in class and his students participated. So I want to ask George about his experience connecting to both Equity Unbound and to virtually connecting sessions as well. Sometimes you join with your whole class.
Sure, and probably a quick check, since as often happens in virtually connecting, I didn't make the sound check before we started. So everybody can hear me okay. I'll just, yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up and so on. Thank you. I'm a lecturer at Cal State Monterey Bay, one of the 23 California State University campuses. And I also am a faculty associate with our Center for Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, which turns out to be important for the current conversation, because that's that Office of Teaching Excellence, whatever it's called on your particular campus or area, that provides that faculty support, which I'm very grateful for in this spring when teaching loads are lighter. So last fall, I just happened to, through the grapevine, and you're seeing part of the grapevine, some people are here today, that, oh, Saba is going to be talking with Maha and some other people, and there's going to be a class thing going on, and it overlapped my class time, which is important with all our international time zones. And okay, it's toward the end of the semester, I'm going to give up an hour of class time and we're going to jump in and just see what happens. And my class did jump in. They weren't very participatory because it was a last minute thing. They didn't have a lot of prep. They got to see at least one of Saba's short films that were on current aspects of surveillance and so on through a University of Ottawa project that she had going. And it went like it went, which was great. And then afterwards, I talked to Saba on the side, just Twitter DMing, and it turned out that she had another opening a few days later that coincided with another of my class times, so I invited her back. And back in the sense that she could come in and interact with my whole class in a guest lecturer, kind of a more standard guest lecturer mode. And that came off, I'm going to say, beautifully, because my students had time to watch several of her short films and do a little bit of thinking beforehand instead of just jumping cold into the session. And so my director came down the hall from the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment and sat in on the class, which is rare because we don't always invite people into our classes. But I thought, okay, let's go for it. And everything went swimmingly. This was one example of the type of thing that happens when we just go with the serendipity and allow the interaction off-site and off-screen to happen, and maybe it bubbles up and becomes some kind of a synchronous event that is of benefit to students as well as maybe to our own development as faculty, staff, and so on. And it was, in this case, through the Equity Unbound course that I had had a little bit of association with the previous year, and this year it turned into just this, confluence of things that all came together in the perfect storm of digital fun and interaction for the students. I should say that in terms of what did the students get out of it, they had a great conversation with Saba over the issues. We had some fruitful sidetracks that were about Black Mirror and some other things in association with her films. And they wrote reflections afterwards, which was kind of the academic side of things for people who need to see something academic happening and evidence of something academic happening. So that was the other thing that happened. So that was my brief experience. And whenever it's appropriate, during the session, we can talk about how I ended up in virtually connecting too.
That's great.
Thank you so much, George.
I know some of the things we tried a little bit. One year we tried to have students during the session. Sometimes we had, because we had a mixture of grad students and undergrads. So we had grad students sometimes take the roles of being host and helping plan some of the questions we might ask during the session and just, give them a larger role. One year, I think we tried to make it, we asked students during the sessions to do some hypothesis annotation of the event page that we created in real time as we were doing this. And then we did this the first year, and we had our studio visits of bringing people in, but we had these, remember the bus tours, Mia? Those were the ideas of doing the same format, but instead of like having some people come in here, we would try to take the class elsewhere. So we took the bus to Cairo to visit with Maha's class, and we went to Puerto Vallarta to a colleague down there, and there was just this favorite moment I remember because it was 2017. Our students, actually one of them asked, what was it like for students in Mexico to hear the things that the then Republican running for president was saying about the country? And it was a really honest conversation. And then this fun thing happened where one of them pointed out, like, it was winter in New Jersey, and it's like, show us out your window. And so, you know, in Mia's class, they showed them the snow outside. And then one of the students down in Mexico, she picked up this iPad that they were sharing from their office, and she walked us down the hallway, and it felt like she was hugging us because she wanted to go out on the patio and show us the ocean view out the door. And so, like, it's a really small thing, but that was sort of our goal, was to have like students to have this chance to mingle and have conversation, hallway type conversation, like the conference theme too. And that was something that was a real special experience that first year.
So I want to actually, Ellen and I, now to pause and listen. We've got folks who participate in Virtually Connecting from all over the world, like South Africa, Kenya, Turkey, Germany, others from the US and Canada and the UK, and Australia even. So do any of you want to speak to something related to like what your experience has been with Virtually Connecting or applying it in other contexts beyond Virtually Connecting? First person to unmute gets the mic.
So I'm going to jump in. I had a really special event that involved Alan and a well-known theorist in media literacies. Sorry, my name is Helen DeWard. I teach media and digital literacies to teacher candidates here in Ontario, in Canada. And we had set up, Alan, you were at DML in 2017, and we had scheduled an event, and it happened to coincide with the actual time I was teaching my class physically in the classroom. So I brought my students into the Virtually Connecting session that we had with, it was Henry Jenkins and Ezra al-Shaif, and she, because of her context, was not physically on camera, but we could hear her voice, and it really just deepened the whole concept of critical digital literacies for my teacher candidates. We had great conversation afterwards. We've been reading Henry Jenkins' work and kind of immersing ourselves in that core context, and it was just an opportunity to just bring those voices to almost to reality for my students. So in that way, it was an opportunity just made by circumstance.
That was really brilliant because one of the grad students in my class I was teaching at the time was working on a thesis, and participatory culture was a main part of it. And so, and she is very shy and humble. And I kind of said, you really have to take the chance to ask Henry about your project idea. And she did, and it was really wonderful reinforcement for her ideas. To be able to talk to the person whose papers she is reading in her research.
Sheila, do you mind if I call on you? Because you have an interesting story with Virtually Connecting where you used to think that it wasn't for you. And
Sure. So I'm Sheila McNeil. I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland. I'm an independent consultant, but I was a lecturer before that. So yeah, I became aware of virtually connecting through my networks, and there were people like Alan and Maha and many other people on this call, and quite a lot of people that were involved in the open education community, and quite a lot of the people at that point that seemed to all be PhD students, and I was quite intrigued by virtually connecting, because I would sort of hear about it. I'd be at, if I was lucky enough to be at a conference, these people were going to virtually connecting. And I just thought it was for like, well, I'm going to use air quotes here, like proper researchers and really serious academic people. Now, I'm not very serious about anything, but I can do a bit of the academic stuff. But I actually just thought it wasn't for me. And then I I think I wrote a reflection, but I'm sure it was Autumn and Maha that reached out to me and said, no, it's for anyone, really. This is just a conversation. So I got involved and became an on-site buddy, a couple of things. And, it was just fantastic to be part of that. But it is, I think, I suppose it just shows that depending on where you're connecting and what narratives you tap into, what you understand about how you participate in something that actually is very, very open and welcoming. And I think that's the thing I really like about virtually connecting as well. And I've learned so much. I think it's made me think about my own practice, because I think I'm quite a welcoming person, but it really makes that more explicit. So that's why I was really interested in today, about finding out a bit more about how you take that concept of hospitality and caring more into teaching. And I think particularly just now, in the time we're living in, that's so relevant, because there's so much stress for everybody, for teachers and for students. And actually just being able to say, there are spaces where we can sit and we can chat, and we can talk about lots of different things. We can all have a context that might be the discipline or the topic here we're looking at, but we can talk about everything else that's impacting on us as well. And that can be, I think these conversations can be some of the richest and most stimulating and most meaningful experiences that you can actually have. So that's kind of my story, and what I'm thinking just now.
Thank you so much, Sheila. So there was a question in the chat from Terry about how does the virtual experience integrate with the live event? And I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to ask other folks also who participated to say. And by the way, there's a lot of people here who are in like Euro-Africa time zones where it's like 11 p.m. and midnight, so they may be a little bit quieter than usual. So the way it integrates with the live event is that it takes a lot of work ahead of time. And we have an article about intentionally equitable hospitality to explain this whole process, but we have to plan ahead of time to tell people when are the break times during the conference, and when is somebody from Virtually Connecting, the on-site buddy, going to be available, and when are the people we're inviting to be guests going to be available. And we try to set up those times, and in conferences that are really big, we sometimes have like 10 or 12 sessions, and sometimes we have just one. And we try to set up those times, and we announce them ahead of time on our blog so that people can sign up to join them. And basically, during the conference itself, the on-site buddy and the guests find each other. Sometimes the conferences give us a nice space that's quiet, so that and so that other people don't show up on camera who don't want to show up on camera. And then folks can sign up for these. But the thing that also about that is, we have to be really intentional about who we invite to be speakers, to be guests, because if you go to a lot of educational technology conferences and the keynote speakers are always white men, and a lot of the people are white men, and that's you might end up like just amplifying the voices of people that are already dominant. And so we've been trying to be very intentional about not doing that all over again. And then the other aspect which Sheila talks about is also like who gets to participate, even the virtual folks coming in. It needs a little bit of an extra layer of, reaching out to people who may not realize that they can join into the conversation because they might think it's a webinar, but we actually want them to come in and join the session and talk. I'm going to stop now and see if others from our sort of guests who are not really guests, they're actually part of Virtually Connecting, want to add anything to that.
I just want to say, like, a thing that especially Maha and Autumn did really well. Like, anytime people tweeted the Virtual Connecting, they would like extend, an invite to people who might want to join. Sometimes people just say, "Oh, that sounds interesting," or "Where can I watch?" And it's often the perception that it might be a thing that's not open to everybody, and that's not what we want to project.
I guess I might chime in that there are a lot of ways that these sessions can go, but if we think about two kind of broad categories, frequently we will ask kind of that on-site guest to give us you know, the 3-minute version of their talk, which invariably stretches to 5 or whatever. But that kind of, it's a way of amplifying their work and their voice without asking them to give the whole formal presentation, much like what Mia and George did for us, to just kind of tell the story of the piece of work to start the conversation. And that's a lot of fun. Another kind of session that we have frequently is more, it's more reflective about the conference. And frequently people will contribute, this other person who's not on this call said some interesting things, and you should go look up that recording or see their article. And you know, sometimes, particularly when it's late in the conference, you get a discussion about how the whole thing has been. So there are different kinds of conversations that we're able to have, which, as Maha said, depends a lot on who you invite and when you invite them, and how that group gels. And I guess I have to throw the mic at someone.
We'll see how long the awkward silence threshold is for people.
Nicola, you wrote in the chat. Do you want to say that out loud?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not
Yes.
everything that you wrote, but whatever you want to say.
Yeah, okay. So we've had a lot of interactions over the years. I was like, I had to go back and look, like, when was OE Global? Oh my word, that was 2017. So that's when I was an on-site buddy. So getting folks together from the conference to talk during one of those virtually connecting sessions. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. I actually, had asked at other conferences, oh, can we do this? And, at different live events, you get different, I think, responses. There's another conference, I won't mention the name, but they saw it as competition for the live conference. So virtually connecting, I will say, ruffles some feathers, because it's about doing things in a different way. Yeah, and I mean, we've been doing things, I think, Maha, we've been collaborating for a while. You've presented for the Emerge Africa Network, which is for educational technology practitioners and researchers across the African continent. You've presented quite a bit, and I've even used some of your recordings in courses that I was teaching. And then Equity Unbound, just going back to that, when I'm now working at Rhodes University, but before that I was at UCT and the Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching, and it became part of our lunchtime discussions. Have you read this post on Equity Unbound? And this was a really interesting thing. So yeah, so many, I think, lots of overlaps and ways of thinking about using online resources generated from, whether it is, virtually connected session or sharing a session for a formal course. I think there are a lot of ways to do that, and for students to have a networked learning experience. Not just students, but even professionals who don't have the funds to attend face-to-face conferences. So like many of our members in Emerge Africa cannot afford to attend expensive international conferences. So they really value virtually connecting and being able to get some, insights that way. But also we're looking for spaces and platforms that suit our contexts, and where we also, want to have local conversations as well, as much as the global is important. So yeah, I think that's a virtually connecting story on my side. Twitter, I think, is of course a big part of that, and keeping connected, even if it's just DMing and say, look at that. It's all these little valuable interactions that add up. So yeah, thank you, Maha, and everyone.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for connecting all these dots. And I think you got people in the chat also connecting other dots. One of the things that I think is really important that you mentioned, and I think it also came up earlier, is that when you come to these synchronous sessions, the community building before and after are also part of that. So it's people maybe get to see the synchronous sessions. I think the TCC community already have their own community and they probably connect with each other apart from the synchronous sessions at the conference. And that's the way it is with virtually connecting, whether people are volunteers for virtually connecting or they just interact with it every now and then. But there's these ongoing conversations, and that's why it flows from virtually connecting sessions to Twitter to our classrooms. So we're all almost in each other's classrooms. And one of the things that George mentioned in the chat is that also there's a couple of things that I actually mix them up together right now, is that Mia and I at the beginning of COVID-19 were like, let's curate resources on continuity with care. How are people going to continue online with care? And then we created a DM conversation with a group of people. We had a conversation like this one, where we all talked about how we're dealing with it. And then Autumn and I were writing an article about COVID care in the time of COVID-19 as well. And I actually got confused between them because everything is connected in that way. So. Would anyone else, Regina, Aras, Christian, Wendy, like to say something? And obviously we want to leave room for folks who are not part of Virtually Connecting to ask questions as well, of course. You can.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I came to Virtually Connecting, I think in 2017. And that was the first time I met Alan in person. I think that was in Toronto for the CC Global. And I really think of Virtually Connecting as like a way by which we can bring like my participation in VC is really through conferences as an on-site body and also as a virtual body. It just gives you an inside look as to what has been going on in the conference. It's like a water cooler conversation, you know, the hallway conversation. A lot of it are takeaways. So it's almost as if you are this agent, like reporting on, oh, you know, what are the things that's been talked about in the conference? What are your takeaways? What are the things that you see are really relevant for, you know, teaching and learning? And then, of course, it's that aspect of community. It's the aspect of connecting with people that normally you wouldn't be able to connect. And I really appreciate that because I don't see that much in a lot of the conferences that I go to in my profession. I'm in the library and information science. So I wish we can translate that, you know, in a whole slew of professions that we belong. And so, yeah, I really, really value the sense of community that the VC has fostered through these years. So.
And while we wait for someone, it doesn't have to be anything complex for technology. I mean, it doesn't have to be a Zoom or a streaming thing or Ken holding a dog. You know, there's a lot of, you know, small scale, you know, video. It could be just a Skype call. You know, the whole idea is just setting up this conversational approach. Of course, no one's listening because Ken has this cute dog.
And it doesn't need to be 40 or 45 participants. It can be, frequently the richest conversations are one guest, one on-site buddy, one virtual buddy, and one or two other people in the conversation. Just so some of the best ones just happen almost naturally.
I mean, this is a micro, I guess, thing that I learned from Virtually Connecting, but I do want to point it out that it's something that's different than this session. This session, we have too many people to have every person go through every single person and have them introduce themselves. But that's kind of a staple of virtually connecting, is that when we go live, usually we have this little announcement, and we're live. And then the virtual buddy will kind of turn things over to the on-site folks, and everybody on-site will introduce themselves and give a little bit of an introduction. And then each person virtually, they'll call out each person virtually, and each person virtually will, who's from different locations, will give a little bit of an introduction of themselves as well. And especially right now, during this crisis with COVID-19, we're doing more video calls than ever. I'm doing video calls with my class, but I'm also doing all these video calls with colleagues for meetings and that kind of stuff. And there's a real difference between folks who, if you can have somebody who sort of takes that role to allow people to have that space to speak, and maybe it's an introduction, but maybe they're giving something else, but somebody who really welcomes everybody in the room to kind of speak, it just makes things feel so much more closer to those face-to-face conversations that we have. And if you don't have that sense of hospitality, I know everybody in here has been in these video calls lately, especially in the last month with everything that's been going on, where everybody's just kind of looking at each other and, oh, what's going on? And there's all these little tech glitches, and it just kind of doesn't really feel like things are gelling. And so I think virtually connecting taught me that sense of hospitality, of welcoming people to come in, recognizing when, because some people are just quiet and they don't want to talk, and being okay with that. But welcoming in people who do want to speak and giving them space for that. It's a tricky thing, and it comes with practice. And so that's what virtually connecting has given me, is like 5 years of practicing this. So I do feel so thankful for that, because I feel like I use it in my teaching, I use it in my staff position, I use it every time that I'm in these kind of situations. And it's not just video calls, it's also in like Slack channels, and it's also an email, and it's just it's a sense of hospitality, inviting people in, recognizing who's speaking and who's not, and trying to give that voice to folks. So yeah, I'll pass the ball to somebody else. Who's the next person?
well, and also I just want to build on what you said, which is also sometimes one of the things. The tricky part of intentionally equitable hospitality is that you sometimes have to shut someone up so they don't dominate the conversation. And I've had to do that a couple of times recently with men who just want to talk about, like I'm doing webinars for my own department, for the university, for all the faculty, and someone wants to take over the entire conversation. I have to just like really try nicely to tell them, you don't want to listen to someone else, but nicely, because we get to do that in virtually connecting a lot as well.
It was kind of a bummer, Maha, when I said that I needed you to teach me how you do that, and you told me, well, you have to do it authentically. You can't just do it like Maha. You have to learn your own way. I was hoping that there was just a trick, and unfortunately, it's what Autumn says. It's practice.
You close one eye.
But also, what I said is when a woman from my part of the world does it, it looks different than when a white man does it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, that's part of why it's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is not a White House press conference, thankfully. Oh, sorry. But I the other
now
thing,
you've done it.
Yeah, the wheels come off.
I pay my campaign video.
Like with all the meetings that happen, and I'm sure people know the Zoom fatigue. Just that, like the class that me and I had last week, we were 2+ almost 3 hours, I think. And it was very energetic, just in this conversation with Saba and Chris. We had one student who doesn't have internet access at home, but he called in on his phone, and he was totally present. And like, I don't know, they would have stayed a lot longer, right, Mia?
Yeah, the conversation, I was just typing in, the conversation was so insightful and intuitive. And I think it had to do with what Autumn said earlier about a kind of culture of hospitality, breaking down hierarchies that students feel so compelled to uphold, things like that. And then once the conversation becomes a truly natural one, it just is like sparks of inspiration are flying. And that was what it was like last week when we had Saba and Chris come in.
One of the issues is that because of virtually connecting, folks have known each other for years. We could just keep going on and on and on, and it might feel exclusive. So we're trying to be an inclusive community, but sometimes just we're so used to each other. It's like being with people who are family and you're not from that family, and so it might feel a bit awkward to join in. So this is kind of how I'm feeling right now. I mean, maybe you were expecting a presentation. This is us chatting, not having a presentation. So I want to give room for other folks to ask questions or make comments or make connections with their own practice. What others think about virtually connecting our own work? So Curtis is asking about, that's a good question. So I mean, George sort of mentioned how that happened when he was having his class join a conversation which was like virtually connecting. I think in my department especially, they're kind of, I think they're fascinated by just how many people I know because of it. I mean, I really know people from Twitter, and then it becomes much more intimate because of virtually connecting, because we get to see each other and stuff like that. Jin Lee is asking if virtually connecting community is discipline specific. So it's education in general. I don't know how far we've expanded, but just generally education can go across education. Started out with educational technology, open education, but I think we do stuff that's just higher ed or just, is there anything else that we do that's not education at all? We have
the e-patient stuff that Rebecca's done.
Yeah, we haven't done it in a long time, but yeah.
We haven't done it in a long time, but it was there for a little while and it was good.
We've done
what was Joe talking about?
Well, we've done some specific events with like language teaching. We've done some stuff
Eurocall
with
and
the Eurocall,
Japan things.
Yeah, the stuff that we did with the Rhetoric and Composition conference. But these are all, I mean, there's subsets of education conferences. And even with those, I would say, I mean, part of it is that we have a challenge recruiting people to come into those because
they're not our community.
Yeah, they're new communities.
Like we keep thinking that folks, we keep thinking this could work for any discipline, right? The only difference is in the educational technology community, it's easy for volunteers to use the technology because they're used to using the technology and managing it. But all the other elements of it, any community can do it, right? And we've spoken a little bit to people who work on climate change, for example, who think that actually this makes sense that they would do that for their conferences rather than, increase their carbon footprint each time. But I don't think it's gone beyond the initial interest so far outside of that.
I've made a real point of trying to pull in K-12 educators, people who are in, elementary or high school classrooms, to have conversations from conferences here in Ontario specifically that I've attended. So I think that's a different place than higher ed, because it is very much timetables bound. You can't leave your classroom or bring your classroom into virtually connecting. So it's very much tied to the teaching schedule for K-12 teachers.
I also think one of the other things that the sessions help with is actually just hosting, people understanding how to host or learning how to host from watching or listening in or just being in the room. It really improves because most people have no idea how to host, and as Joe was saying, learning how to you know, to tell people to shut up in a very nice way, you know, and learning how to limit what people say at any one time, or not limit actually, but just make sure that they leave more time for others to also be able to contribute. So I think that's one of the things that I've really learned by being part of this family. The other thing is also learning how to welcome people to different platforms, learning how to sell what it is that you're presenting, or what it is that is going on in any platform. It also helps that with that. So those are the things that we've learned. One more thing is that I am a facilitator in a course that is offered, and we also started kind of doing the virtually connecting at the end of every presentation that we do. We just switch off everything and tell people you can take the mic and we can talk about anything, and it really helps with everybody who's there. So yeah, so those are the things that this really helps. If you join it often, you learn a lot of other things that are never in a presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. I will have to put on my role as a facilitator and say that we're about to end this session. There is another one going on in another Zoom room, so we want to give participants a chance to exit and enter. But you know, I just wanted to turn it back to you folks to maybe show us how you end a virtually connecting session. How do you end it?
Sometimes they don't end. No, quite often, I mean, at a conference, sometimes there's only a 20-minute window. Sometimes the virtual people like to stay on and just chat, you know, so I've seen them go on for like 45 minutes or longer. So there's not like, I mean, we'll say now, you know, at some point Ken will say we're going to stop the stream.
So I would say we need to, I want to be respectful for our guests that are on site.
Okay.
And I know they have a lot of things to do and go to lunch and eat. And so we'll wrap up this session now. And for anyone who wants to stay, I'm good for another half an hour. So I can stay around, and we'll probably turn off the recording, and then we'll continue and do a post show, although we're actually still recording right now. So that's the usual way we do it.
Okay, good. Well, I want to officially thank all of you from the Virtually Connecting family for sharing your experiences and this kind of unique format. And I think we have a lot of great ideas to take back to whatever application that we have in our work or in our lives. So thanks so much. And this recording is going to be made available at our conference website. It's going to be on YouTube. Ken is going to make sure that it's all saved and ready to go. So for those of you who want to hang out with the VC team, go ahead and do so. Others like myself who have to get started in the next session, we're going to exit and say aloha, everyone. Thank you so much.
Aloha.
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 Aloha. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, TCC.
Aloha. Thank you, everyone.
Enough that camera for a second.
I'm still recording, so I'm actually going to kill the live stream now.
Okay.
It's not live on YouTube.
There we go. And I will actually stop the recording now as well.